look at how the great problems of the Queen and the monarchy in her lifetime have been all about love and marriage and sex.
The question a lot of people here in Britain are asking this morning is, where's the Queen?
It's like being brought up in a monastery with glass walls. Everyone can look in, and every moment of weakness, it'll all be seen and exposed and ridiculed.
The red light's on.
We are interviewing Larry Adler, Ranger Prim Phillips.
We are interviewing Commander Michael Avis.
We are interviewing Lady Janet Mary Young.
For the first time in her reign, the Queen put family before duty.
We could now be witnessing the end of the monarchy, and the reigning Queen could possibly be the last.
She was being the princess and working very hard. He was still in the Navy. Now, in our innocence, we thought this was going to go on for a very long time. After all, the king was quite young. There might have been 40 more years as princess.
When we were on that Commonwealth tour, we were in Kenya, and the people of Kenya, having as a wedding present, given them little cigar a lot.
We had a day or so there to adjust and rest and do things. Prince Philip went to sleep in a little room that was off to one side. The Queen was at a desk writing letters. The phone rang. My colleague said, Mike, there's a ghastly rumour going around that the King has died. And he was in amongst all the press people there. And then they were saying that they'd heard. So I said, well, Martin, that's frightening, but I cannot do a thing on a rumour like that. I mean, I just won't do anything. And he said, no, I'm not suggesting you should. Down went the phone. I saw a radio on the shelf above me, and there's a door open to where the Queen is sitting. So I shut the door and switched on the radio and hunted about for the BBC. And then I could hear the bell of Big Ben. I thought, me gods. So my hair stood up a little bit more.
This is London. It is with the greatest sorrow that we make the following announcement. At 10:45 today, February the 6th, 1952, that the King passed peacefully away in his sleep earlier this morning.
And that was that. So I whizzed round into where Prince Philip was sleeping and told him. His first reaction was one of almost as though a huge weight had hit him. And he just stood there, silently, and thought. The implications of the fact that she's becoming the Queen. And then he straightened himself up and he went in to tell the Queen. And she was, weeping desperately for the loss of her father. They walked up and down together, very close. And then she straightened up, fully conscious of the fact that she was queen and that she must tend to that affair immediately. And she went into the desk that she'd been working on and started to send all these telegrams off around the Commonwealth and to friendly countries like the United States and so on.
There was no time then for her, if she had wanted to grieve. And a very typical reaction, actually. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It means we've all got to go home." As the plane was about to touch down at London Airport, and the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and my parents, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, and all the receiving line of the cabinet were drawn up there in their black clothes. And she sort of leans across, looks out and says, "Oh God, they sent the hearses," meaning that instead of her car, one of the big black cars. And somehow the way she said it, one knew this 25-year-old realized that the end of her private life had come. And that for the rest of her life, she would be a public figure till the day she died.
I asked you all, whatever your religion, to pray for me on the day of my coronation.
And as the storms of cheering surge with the approaching procession along the river, here, in contrast, the Abbey holds its ancient peace.
I think what changed for the Queen at the moment that she succeeded her father was the sense that she was on her own. I think that that's what really changed for her.
She did have the enormous advantage of being trained by her own father. But I think she must have enjoyed those training sessions with Papa because it was something so special between those two. Nobody else had it.
I remember her once saying to me that my father told me I must always remember that whatever I said or did to anyone, they would remember it. So that if I showed disapproval, they will remember that I showed disapproval. Therefore, I think she's very, very careful not to give any sort of impression that might be construed as disapproval.
The Duke of Edinburgh comes to vow lifelong allegiance to his Queen.
She's the Queen, and he, perforce, is the husband. So what does the husband do?
Elizabeth, as Princess and Queen, has always been guided by her sense of duty. But it's one of the extraordinary things about the Queen is that she fell in love and married just about the first man she met.
My father happened to be there when the King and Queen took the two girls to Dartmouth, when I think Princess Elizabeth was only about 12 years old. And as Prince Philip was almost the senior cadet, and of course this absolute Greek god, and I think that the princess fell headlong in love with him at that moment.
The Queen was too young. Nobody thought of her falling in love and remaining in love with that person for the rest of her life. I mean, she was a child.
But clearly he made a great impression on her, and the romance, if you like, developed sort of rather gradually.
Now, it caused her parents great anxiety. What parent wouldn't be anxious about a daughter who wants to marry the very first man she's fallen in love with? It was a matter of her personal happiness. It was a matter of the stability of the crown. Her parents, in fact, while accepting Philip and having Philip, because he was, after all, a member of the family, to stay, wouldn't let her actually get engaged until she was over 21, several years after she wanted. Because, you know, she wasn't just taking on the man she thought she loved, she was taking on the man who had to shoulder almost half the burden of the monarchy.
Well, I was at his bachelor party the night before the wedding with the Princess Elizabeth. He was scared. His face was white. This man just began to realize what he was getting into. And now he finds he doesn't like it.
It was very much a conventional British household. He was very much the man of the family. He took the decisions. She looked up to him in their private life. Obviously, as princess, she had a lot of official things to do. But they were still able, with these two small children, to have this family group.
Prince Philip was basically a man, and he was a big man, and he was a man's man too. I think there must have been moments when it would have been pretty heavy for him to take.
This extremely active, enthusiastic young man who suddenly finds his whole life is going to be taken away from him, and probably thinking he'll become a yes man for the rest of his life. This really devastated their lives, actually, as a married couple.
Could you tell me, what is your job in your own mind?
Well, I haven't got one. I'm self-employed.
But surely you must have some clear idea of what role you fulfill in modern society.
Very difficult to answer.
Queen can't be the wife anymore, the mother. She really had very little time to be with her children. So Prince Philip, in a way, sort of became the house husband, and he was the one that looked after the children, not actually physically looked after them, but he organised them.
When she became queen, they would see her perhaps for half an hour in the morning, 9 o'clock, for half an hour, and then she would go off for a week, maybe a month, maybe several months. But in a good week, she might be there in the evening and go up to see them having their baths and sit on a little gilt chair which would be brought in by a lackey, not take part in bath time or splashing or anything like that, but just sit there rather uneasily and then dash away after half an hour.
I don't think it was, in that respect, Prince Philip and indeed the Queen were significantly different to an awful lot of upper middle class British parents. So that was the way that you behaved. You don't cry in public, you don't cuddle in public, etc. I mean, life may be a lot more civilized now, but it wasn't something peculiar to Prince Charles's relationship with his parents, and it wasn't that anybody was being deliberately unkind or cold. It was just that was the way you did things.
What the Queen and the Duke did with their children, boarding schools that often have strict discipline and didn't always produce rounded human beings emotionally at the end of the process.
She's really sacrificed her family in a way. Duty really what came before personal happiness, and she had her work and that came first.
Elizabeth and her younger sister Margaret were always very close as children, but both of them knew that in the end, Elizabeth would be on the throne and Princess Margaret would need to find a role for herself. I don't think she ever really settled to that, to be honest.
The arrival of Princess Margaret and her husband is greeted with the cheers of the crowd, the flashing lights, and nervous children. Dignified bedlam rings. Most adults remember Margaret growing up with her sister, and the two children were as loved by Americans as they were by Britons.
The British and European press has tried to make Margaret the subject of romance with 29-year-old Roddy Llewellyn. But despite pictures of them in the Caribbean together, there has been little substance to back up the perennial gossip mongers.
Queen Elizabeth has ruled out divorce for her sister Margaret. Instead, the 45-year-old princess may obtain a legal separation from her husband, Lord Snowdon. They've been married for 16 years, but 10 of those years have reportedly been stormy. And recent stories of Princess Margaret's involvement with a 28-year-old jet-setter named Roddy Llewellyn provide motivation for the current separation talk. Divorce is a thorny subject for the British royal family.
She was a divorcee, I think, and the question whether it was appropriate for the King of England to be married to a lady who was first divorced.
This is London. A quarter of an hour ago, the Prime Minister came to the bar of the House and handed to the Speaker a message from His Majesty the King.
A few hours ago,
I discharged my last duty as King and Emperor, that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility without the help and support of the woman I love.
We therefore do now hereby proclaim that the high and mighty Prince Albert Frederick Arthur George is now become our only lawful and rightful king. God save the king.
The two girls were in their house at Hyde Park Corner when Elizabeth heard all the noise of the cheering when George became king. And Elizabeth ran downstairs to see what all the excitement was. And the footman told her that her father was king. She came back and told her little sister, who was 6, and Princess Margaret said, "Does that mean you'll be queen?" And she said, "Yes, someday." Princess Margaret said, "Poor you."
Princess Margaret has been leading an active, and for royalty, a somewhat untraditional social life. Now, England is intrigued by the rumor that Margaret has fallen in love. The man is Peter Townsend, a war hero, a captain in the RAF. Townsend, however, has been once divorced, and powerful social and religious forces are marshaled against the romance. Still, Margaret wants to marry Townsend.
The Queen and Prince Philip very kindly invited me to dinner, and we talked about this very disturbing situation, obviously. But the Queen, I shall never forget, her reaction was one of great sympathy, although, no doubt, she harbored the greatest anxiety, I expect. Marriage seemed to be the least likely solution.
The Queen was in conflict because as head of the Church of England, she could not really permit her sister to marry a divorced man. But as the sister of Princess Margaret, she obviously was very keen that Princess Margaret should be happy. And it wasn't easy.
I don't think for a moment that the Queen said to her, listen here, Margaret, you can't do that. The Queen would have been told by advisors that it was not on. Very painful for all concerned.
It's sometimes been misreported that it was the Queen that said that this relationship couldn't be allowed. Actually, she was devastated that when push came to shove, it was the government who said, actually, we can't allow you to marry this man.
The following statement has just been issued from Clarence House by Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret. I would like it to be known that I have decided not to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend. Mindful of the Church's teaching that Christian marriage is indissoluble, and conscious of my duty to the Commonwealth, I have resolved to put their consideration before any others.
I think she had a lot of sympathy for Margaret because, after all, the Queen knew what true love was. She had married the man of her dreams.
I don't envy the royals their life at all, really. They have to live under the glare of publicity all the time. Everything they do is reported and quoted and criticised. But Princess Margaret, she had a really difficult life.
I think this is one of the tragedies of her life, that she never knew who she was, never knew who she was supposed to be, and she left it to others, not least the media, to work it out for her.
It is a scene of chaos and destruction. This castle, dating back to the 9th century, the fire started in the private chapel near to St. George's Hall.
The events read like a tabloid redo of Old Testament curses. Plague and pestilence have been replaced by fire, rumor, and outright scandal rocking the British royal family.
With 3 broken marriages among her 4 children, the Queen's efforts to promote an image of family harmony are now under the severest strain.
Look at how the great problems of the Queen and the monarchy in her lifetime have been all about love and marriage and sex. The abdication, Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend later. And that creates problems.
Buckingham Palace has condemned the publication of a series of newspaper photographs of the Duchess of York and the Texan businessman John Bryan.
Divorce? Very mirror. Never been mentioned by anybody.
I just feel very sad. I think it's very sad when 2 people who appear to be so happily married quite suddenly divorce.
Royal composure collapsed as Princess Diana, under extraordinary media attention, broke down in tears, since a book detailing her unhappiness was published last week. The book claims Diana's marriage became so miserable that she tried to take her life.
"1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis. No institution, city, monarchy, whatever, should expect to be free from the scrutiny of those who give it their loyalty and support, not to mention those who don't. But we are all part of the same fabric of our national society, and that scrutiny by one part of another can be just as effective if it is made with a touch of gentleness, good humor, and understanding.
As a result of the occurrences over the course of the past several months and the pushing of the self-destruct button by the monarchy, that we could now be witnessing the end of the monarchy, and the reigning Queen could possibly be the last.
Britain's Queen Elizabeth said she has had it. It's time for Prince Charles and Princess Diana to officially end their troubled marriage.
The prince who made his televised admission of adultery over a year ago is said to agree. The princess who made her televised admission of adultery a few weeks ago is said to be devastated and will give her response after the holidays.
The Queen actually tried to bring Diana under her wing, but Diana was very reluctant.
I think the Diana phenomenon Obviously, Charles couldn't handle it, and neither could the Queen.
The Princess of Wales embroiled now in a fresh round of personal controversy.
The polo-playing former Guards officer claims he had a 3-year affair with the Princess.
This morning, as she left her exclusive London health club, the Princess of Wales was saying nothing.
Rugby star Will Carling and his wife Julia are splitting up, and everyone's asking, is the Princess of Wales to blame?
Confirmation of Princess Diana's first serious romance since her split with Charles will be shown in London's Sunday Mirror tomorrow. The evidence, a photograph of a kiss with millionaire Dodi El Fayed during a Mediterranean cruise, cost $400,000.
This is BBC One. We've interrupted our programmes for a news report. We now go over to Martin Lewis in the news studio.
We interrupt this film to tell you we are getting reports that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been badly injured in a car crash in France.
Just to confirm the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died in a car accident in Paris, which also killed her companion, Dodi Fayed.
The question a lot of people here in Britain are asking this morning is, where's the Queen? The oceans of flowers from Diana's mourners are piling up in front of Buckingham Palace, but they haven't been acknowledged. And unlike the rest of Britain, where the flags are at half-staff in Diana's memory, there's no flag flying over the palace. Nobody's home.
When the Princess of Wales died, the Queen was up at Balmoral with the 2 little princes whose mother had been killed. And yet she was castigated for not leaving them and coming to London to mourn in the streets with people who'd never even met the Princess.
She had 2 grandchildren who must have been fairly cut up. Their mothers once sub dead. To rush them down to London for the height of publicity seemed to me unnecessary. Why you could be less feeling Balmoral than at Buckingham Palace, I don't know.
I'm now looking through the walls of the shattered school into the main hall, which is a mass of people, firemen and policemen, mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, and everybody.
The South Wales disaster. It's now feared that nearly 200 lives were lost when the coal tip at Aberfan near Merthyr Tydfil slid forward today.
One of the few regrets that the Queen has about her reign was that she felt that she reacted too slowly in Wales at a place called Aberfan back in the 1960s.
There's always been controversy and criticism about the Queen not actually coming earlier to Aberfan or immediately to Aberfan, because obviously Lord Snowdon was the first royal to actually come to Aberfan.
Princess Margaret couldn't understand why I wanted to go down. I just did, you know, felt I must. And I stayed there, just going into people's houses, making cups of tea. They wanted to talk, but they were in a state of terrible shock.
So for the Queen, I think her decision not to come at that time wasn't probably the right decision for surviving people. And I think to this day, the Queen actually had a bit of guilt about that herself.
The Queen stood there as a mother, knowing that had circumstances been somewhat different, her child's name might be fastened to the sandbag to mark his place of honor in death's final ceremonial occasion.
I know with all the tragedies in the world, I think Aberfan has been the main one that's touched the Queen forever and a day, really, until the day she dies.
Queen Elizabeth and the rest of the royal family are on summer holiday, as usual, in Scotland. And apart from a customary trip to church on Sunday, the Queen's made no public appearance and no public statement. But to those who are close to the royal family, that's no surprise.
And if ever the monarchy wobbled, it was in those 48 hours when they were stuck up in Balmoral, when the country wanted the Queen in London and grieving.
On the eve of Princess Diana's funeral, the royal family is returning to London, hoping in perhaps to quell some of the criticism of their actions since Diana's death.
The Queen's convoy arrived in London. As it swept up to Buckingham Palace, the limousine halted at the gates, and the Queen and Prince Philip got out to take in the mass of floral tributes.
The Queen was actually extremely nervous, because she could feel the hostility, and actually she heard people say, "Oh, about time you've come." You know, they can hear an awful lot of things that the crowd say. And then I think a woman actually gave her a bunch of flowers and said, "Would you like me to place it for you?" And the woman said, "No, ma'am, it's for you." And that sort of broke the ice. It was that moment. And I think suddenly people saw her. Instead of feeling all prickly and angry, they suddenly thought, my goodness, this is a grandmother and she's got to deal with all this.
Queen Elizabeth will speak publicly today about the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Joining me from London is NPR's Michael Goldfarb to talk about the extraordinary move by the Queen to speak to her subjects. Any idea what she will say today?
It will be a very carefully crafted speech because people will listen to it with great interest.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others. I hope that tomorrow we can all, wherever we are, join in expressing our grief at Diana's loss and gratitude for her all-too-short life.
Well, I thought she said everything she should have said. Can't think of anything that she left out at all. I think it's completely appropriate.
And they're gathering now at the entrance. This is an extraordinary view we're seeing here. We've never, as far as I'm aware, seen the royal family standing like this at the gates of Buckingham Palace.
At the funeral, the Queen was very dignified and she bowed her head when Diana's coffin went past. And it was spectacularly done.
I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. It is a chance to show to the whole world the British nation united in grief and respect.
Mr. Speaker, today Her Majesty the Queen becomes the country's longest reigning monarch. And it is, of course, typical of her selfless sense of service that she would have us treat this day just like any other. But, Mr. Speaker, while I rarely advocate disobeying Her Majesty, least of all in our own Parliament, I do think it's right that today we should stop and take a moment as a nation to mark this historic milestone and to thank Her Majesty for the extraordinary service that she's given to our country over more than 6 decades. In 63 years and 216 days, she's worked with 12 Prime Ministers, 6 Archbishops of Canterbury, 9 Cabinet Secretaries. She's answered 3.5 million pieces of correspondence, sent over 100,000 telegrams to centenarians across the Commonwealth, and met more people than any other monarch in history. She has served this country with unerring grace, dignity, and decency, and long may she continue to do so.
The important thing to remember about the early upbringing of Princess Elizabeth was that although she was a princess, she was not in line for the throne. And I believe this gave her a modesty that people respect.
I think the only thing she might allow herself to feel is to say to her father, look, I've done it. I've been Queen for such a long time and I've tried to do it the way you taught me.
There is a motto which has been borne by many of my ancestors, a noble motto, I serve. I should like to make that dedication now. It is very simple. I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.